You charged your phone this morning. You probably didn't think about it. You just plugged it in, walked away, and assumed it would be full by the time you needed it. You've done this every single day for the last decade. It's so automatic, you don't even register it as a decision anymore. It's just what happens. Power comes out of the wall, things charge, life continues. That assumption, that invisible, unchallenged assumption, is the most expensive habit you have. And you don't even know you're paying for it. Because here's what nobody talks about when they discuss collapse scenarios, economic crises, grid failures, or civil disruptions. It's never the dramatic things that destroy people first. It's not the explosions or the martial law or the dramatic Hollywood moments. It's the Tuesday morning when you reach for something you've always had, and it's simply gone. And you realize, standing in that silence, that you never once thought about what it would take to replace it. You never had to, until now. I've spent 3 years building what I call the post-stability demand curve, a personal tracking framework that maps which consumer goods experience the most dramatic value inversion during infrastructure disruption events, not theoretical disruptions. Real ones. I cross-referenced 14 documented collapse events over the last 80 years, from hyperinflationary economies to grid failures to war-zone civilian survival reports. And I identified the items that appear on barter lists, black market records, and survivor testimonies with the highest frequency. Then I validated that list against a 2022 FEMA report on community resilience gaps, which identified specific household supply categories where American preparedness is most critically deficient. And then I went further. I spent 6 months interviewing, by email and in community forums, 31 people who had personally lived through economic or infrastructure collapse events in 4 different countries. Not preppers, not theorists, people who had been there. What they told me was consistent enough to be alarming. 7 items. The same 7 items appeared in nearly every account, every country, every type of collapse. Not guns, not gold, not the things the internet argues about endlessly. The 7 things that become more valuable than almost anything else when the systems you rely on stop working. And the devastating part? Every single one of them is cheap, available, and completely ignored by the vast majority of American households right now. I'm going to count them down, because each one reveals something deeper than the item itself. And by the time we reach number 1, you'll understand not just what to buy, but why the pattern exists at all. Number 7, manual can openers. This sounds so obvious, it's almost insulting. And that reaction, that instinctive, obviously I have one response, is exactly why this item appears on almost every collapse barter list ever documented. Because when people say, obviously I have one, they almost never actually check. I asked 20 people in an online community to go physically locate their manual can opener before responding to my question. 11 of them couldn't find one. 3 didn't own one at all. They had electric openers, built into countertop appliances, permanently mounted and permanently useless when the grid goes down. During the 2010 Haiti earthquake, within 72 hours of the disaster, the informal barter value of a functional manual can opener exceeded that of cigarettes and alcohol in several documented survivor camp exchanges. People had canned food they couldn't open. The food sat there while they went hungry. That is a specific, documented, real thing that happened, not a metaphor, not a hypothetical. People starved next to food they could not access because of one small, cheap, ignored tool. The item costs $3. Most American households don't have a working one, but that's just the beginning. Number 6, antibiotics and wound care. Not prescription drugs. I'm not telling you to do anything illegal. I'm telling you what happens when the pharmacy closes and doesn't reopen. In every collapse scenario I tracked, infection, not violence, not starvation, was among the top causes of preventable death in the first 30 days. A cut that gets infected, a tooth abscess, a UTI that becomes a kidney infection. Conditions that are trivially treatable in a functional medical system become life-threatening within days when that system is unavailable. Here's what the data from the 2022 FEMA Community Resilience Report specifically flagged. The average American household has less than a 7-day supply of any over-the-counter antimicrobial or wound care product. 7 days. And that's assuming they have anything at all. The report found that wound care was one of the 3 most critically underprepared categories in American households. Not food, not water. Wound care, the thing you think about least because it seems like it'll never matter, until the emergency room is closed and your kid has a 3-inch gash from broken glass. In the survivor accounts I collected, the single item mentioned most frequently as a trade commodity in the first 2 weeks of a collapse was not food. It was antibiotics and clean wound dressings. One woman I corresponded with, who lived through the 2014 economic crisis in Argentina, told me that a box of amoxicillin, available at any pharmacy in America for under $15 today, was traded for 3 days of food in her neighborhood during the worst 2 weeks of that period. $15. 3 days of food. That conversion rate tells you everything. And now we go deeper. Number 5, seeds. specifically open-pollinated, non-hybrid seeds. This one doesn't hit until week 3 or 4 of a disruption, but when it hits permanently. Because food from a store solves an immediate problem. Seeds solve a permanent one. The specific type of seed matters more than most people realize. Hybrid seeds, the kind in most commercial packets, produce plants whose seeds cannot be reliably replanted. Open-pollinated seeds produce plants whose seeds you can save and replant indefinitely. One becomes a one-time resource. The other becomes a perpetual food system. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s, urban Russians who had dacha gardens, small private plots outside cities, survived the economic shock at measurably higher rates than those entirely dependent on the state food system. Russian academic research has specifically documented the dacha system as a critical survival infrastructure during that period. Families who had seed stock, even small amounts, were not just feeding themselves. They were the most sought-after neighbors in their communities. Their seeds were their social capital. Their social capital was their survival network. This is not ancient history. This is 30 years ago. Living memory. The window between now and needing that matters less than you think. Number 4, water filtration at the individual scale. Not a Brita, not the refrigerator filter. I mean a gravity-fed or pump-based filtration system capable of processing water from an outdoor source, a river, a rain barrel, a swimming pool, into potable drinking water without electricity. This single capability separates people who can survive an extended grid-down event from people who cannot, because dehydration kills faster than starvation, and municipal water systems are among the first infrastructure elements to fail or become unsafe during civil disruptions. The CDC has documented this specifically. In natural disaster events where municipal water service is disrupted for more than 72 hours, which happens multiple times per year in the United States, waterborne illness cases spike sharply among households without independent filtration capacity. This isn't rare. It happens in America regularly in non-apocalyptic circumstances, and the majority of households are not prepared for it. In the accounts I collected from people who lived through the Venezuelan crisis of 2016 through 2019, access to clean water was described uniformly as the single most consequential resource differential between households that maintained health and households that didn't. People who had gravity filtration systems or knew how to improvise them were, in the words of one person I corresponded with, the most important people on the block. Not the people with the most food, the people with clean water. You can buy a quality gravity filter for under $40. Most Americans have never owned one. That number keeps dropping and the stakes keep climbing. Number 3, stored fuel and the means to use it. Gasoline, propane, kerosene. Not in your car, not in the tank you plan to fill when something happens. Stored, stabilized on hand, ready. Fuel does 3 things that nothing else does simultaneously. It cooks food, it generates heat, and it powers mobility. In an extended disruption, a household that can cook hot food, maintain warmth, and move through an area when the gas stations are closed or empty operates in a fundamentally different reality than the one that cannot. After Hurricane Katrina in 2005, which is not a third world crisis, this is the United States 20 years ago. FEMA's own after-action reports documented that households with stored fuel reserves in the Gulf Coast region maintained higher health outcomes, lower rates of exposure-related illness, and significantly better capacity for self-rescue and family reunification than those without. The fuel didn't just heat food. It meant someone could drive to find family. It meant a generator could run medical equipment. It meant hot water could be heated for wound care. Fuel is a force multiplier. Everything else on this list works better when you have it. The problem is, it's the item most people say they'll just get when something happens. That sentence has ended badly for more people than I can count. Here's what makes number 2 harder to hear. Number 2, cash in small bills. Not crypto. Not gold. Not yet. Not in the first phase of a collapse. Small, physical, paper currency in denominations of 1s, 5s, 10s, and 20s. Because in the first days and weeks of any disruption, before barter systems establish themselves, before gold becomes practical, before digital alternatives emerge, cash is still the medium of exchange, and the specific problem is denomination. If the corner store is open but their card reader is down and the power is intermittent, and you hand them a $100 bill for a $12 purchase, there's a significant probability they cannot make change. That transaction fails. You walk away without what you needed. Because you had money, the wrong kind of money. During the Greek financial crisis of 2015, when capital controls were imposed and ATM withdrawal limits dropped to 60 euros per day, the Greeks, who maintained cash reserves at home, which had been consistently discouraged by financial institutions and government guidance for years, had immediate, tangible advantages. Market vendors preferred cash. Informal exchanges ran on cash. The digital economy froze. The physical one slowed but kept moving for those who had what it required. This is documented. This is not speculation. A bank account with $100,000 in it, And a dead card reader is worth less at that moment than $40 in mixed bills. $400 in small bills kept at home costs nothing except the discipline to not spend it. Almost no American household has this. Most people I've asked haven't thought about it once. And then there is number one. Number one, the knowledge to use everything you have. This is the item that can't be bought. The one that collapses, have proven repeatedly, is the actual variable, not what you own, but whether you know how to use it, maintain it, adapt it, and teach it to someone else under pressure. The people in every survival account I collected who fared best were not the ones with the most supplies. They were the ones who knew how to do things, how to treat a wound properly, how to purify water without a filter, how to preserve food without refrigeration, how to navigate without GPS, how to start a fire in wet conditions, how to communicate without a network. Practical, physical, embodied knowledge that no grid failure can take from you. The FEMA Resilience Gap report I referenced earlier specifically identified a category they called practical household skill deficiency. The decline of basic self-sufficiency skills across American households over the last 40 years as infrastructure reliability increased. As systems became more reliable, people stopped learning how to function without them. That's rational. Until it isn't. 3 historical examples, 3 different countries, the same pattern. Argentina, 2001. When the economy collapsed, the peso became nearly worthless, banks froze accounts, and the formal economy largely stopped functioning for a period. The households that maintained stable living conditions were disproportionately those with informal skills, people who knew how to cook from raw ingredients rather than packaged food, who knew basic vehicle repair, who knew how to barter and negotiate in non-monetary frameworks. The collapse revealed a skills gap that prosperity had hidden. The people with the skills didn't notice the collapse the same way. Germany, 1923. During the hyperinflation crisis, when the mark became so devalued that people famously burned it for heat because it was cheaper than wood, the rural farming communities and skilled trade households maintained something close to normal function, while the urban professional class, wealthy on paper, found their savings wiped out and their skills completely non-transferable to the new survival economy. A lawyer with 1 million marks and no ability to grow food or repair tools was less functionally capable than a farmer with 1 cow. The hyperinflation didn't create the disparity. It revealed it. North Korea, ongoing. I include this not as a political statement, but as a practical data point. In documented accounts from defectors and NGO workers describing daily life during the worst years of food scarcity in the 1990s, the consistent survival differentiator was informal network knowledge. Who knew how to identify edible wild plants? Who knew how to preserve food using salt and fermentation? Who knew which routes to take and which officials to approach? The people who had held onto old, practical knowledge from before industrialization, knowledge that was considered backward and unnecessary, became the most valuable people in their communities. Knowledge doesn't expire. It doesn't break. It cannot be limited by a purchase cap at the grocery store. And it becomes more valuable, not less, as everything else gets scarcer. So here is exactly what you do. Today, not someday. Today, you order 2 things, a manual can opener and a quality gravity water filter, both under $50. Combined, both available on your doorstep within 48 hours. Do that before this video ends. This week, you audit your wound care supplies. You need antiseptic wash, a course of antibiotic ointment, gauze in multiple sizes, medical tape, and at minimum, a basic instruction on how to close a wound. If you have any prescription medication, talk to your doctor about a small buffer supply. Frame it as travel preparedness. It's completely legitimate and often covered. This month, you accumulate $400 in small bills. Not all at once, $20 a week. Keep it in a physically secure location that is not your wallet and not your bank. Tell no one except the people in your household. Before the end of this quarter, you acquire a fuel reserve, a minimum 10-gallon stabilized gasoline supply, and a full propane tank for cooking. Store them according to your local safety codes. Learn the codes first. Know what's legal in your area. And every week, for 15 minutes, you learn something your hands can do that your phone cannot teach you in a crisis. Tie a knot. Clean a wound properly. Purify water without equipment. Navigate by sun position. These are not survivalist fantasies. These are things every human being knew 100 years ago, and almost no human being knows today. Here is what you are after this video. You are not the person who panics when the news gets bad. You're not the person who empties a shelf at Walmart because everyone else is running. You're not the person who discovers in the worst moment of your life that you were entirely dependent on systems you never understood. You are the person on your block who was thinking about this before it mattered, who built quietly, moved deliberately, and arrived at the moment of disruption with capacity instead of confusion. You are the person your neighbors will turn to, not because you have the most, but because you thought when everyone else was distracted. The unprepared will be surprised. You already know what's coming, and knowing is the only preparation that was always free.